I am Shelley Christensen, the Senior Director of Faith, Inclusion, and Belonging at RespectAbility, and the co-founder of Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month, or JDAIM. I'm really happy to see you here today. I am a white woman with curly brown hair. I'm wearing blue glasses and a burgundy top and a lime green cardigan and a hand knit scarf in the same colors. Behind me is a Tiffany style lamp and photographs of garden flowers. Rabbi Dr. Abraham Joshua Heschel, may his memory be for blessing, was a Jewish theologian and social justice activist. Dr. Heschel marched from Selma, Alabama to the Capitol in Montgomery, arm in arm with his friend, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He also championed the cause of Soviet Jews and wondered what kind of God could have permitted the Holocaust. He was a philosopher and wrote many books, including The Sabbath, where he wrote, "Creation, we are taught, is not an act that happened once upon a time, once and forever. The act of bringing the world into existence is a continuous process." As we recognize the 15th anniversary of JDAIM, we pause briefly to recognize many inclusive practices that are now part of the Jewish community. And then, in the spirit of all humans, created B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God, we too march on to answer the call to create a world where people with disabilities and those who love us finally feel that they belong to their synagogues, to houses of study, and to the community they choose. Still, to borrow from Rabbi Dr. Heschel, we must allow the process of creation to continue to develop beyond inclusion until all disabled people who want access to the full scope of Jewish life are valued, respected, and at last belong. Please welcome my colleague, Lauren Applebaum.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Really appreciate that introduction. For those of you who are trying to watch it on Facebook, it looks like there might be an error. So I know it's kind of coming in and out, so we apologize. We will be sharing it on all of our social media platforms this coming week. I am Lauren Applebaum, RespectAbility's Senior Vice President of Entertainment and News Media. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a white woman with shoulder-length brown hair, wearing a navy blue shirt. Behind me is a white background, white wall, and a door. So I come from, as all of our panelists do, from many intersectional backgrounds. I have undergraduate degrees in urban studies and Midrash, which is biblical exegesis, from the Jewish Theological Seminary, as well as a master's degree in broadcast journalism. And so all these different things that I've kind of studied and become, my individual. And I also have an acquired non-apparent disability called reflex sympathetic dystrophy. Therefore, I have the opportunity to work at the intersection of disability, employment, and the entertainment industry. I oversee our content advisement work and trainings to ensure authentic representation of disability, as well as building the disability community within the industry through our entertainment labs. This work helps increase diverse and authentic representation of disabled individuals on screen, leading to systemic change in how society views and values disabled individuals. This conversation will include several clips from the work of our panelists and last approximately 1 hour and have time for participant Q&A at the end. This Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month, we're happy to celebrate the work of Jewish disabled writers and filmmakers today. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists. Asha is an Emmy-winning filmmaker and 2-time Netflix writer and director fellow. Asha is a Jewish, Afro-Latina, and Caribbean Asian female director with disabilities. She disrupts stigmas throughout the entire entertainment industry by creating accessible and inclusive sets for productions and advocating for diverse storytelling. A Yale graduate, former finance professional, and co-founder of Slamdance Unstoppable, which is a film program at the Academy Award and BAFTA qualifying film festival dedicated to uplifting films with or by disabled talent and filmmakers. Asha impacts positive change beyond just the silver screen. Eden is a writer-director with ADHD and PTSD who has a penchant for crafting cinematic tales about bad people with good hearts. An Israeli with a short stint in the US as an immigrant, Eden insists on remaining an optimistic storyteller with a dark sense of humor. A proud alumnus of both the RespectAbility and 1 in 4 labs, Eden is a Jewish family man with Arab roots from Yemen and Libya. Ava is a writer, consultant, actress, speaker, and advocate for disability and autism representation in the entertainment industry. She brings her lived experience to her work as a Chinese transracial Jewish autistic adoptee, creating a professional niche for herself at the intersections of entertainment, storytelling, inclusion, and accessibility. Ava was most recently the autistic creative consultant on the Broadway musical How to Dance in Ohio, based on the HBO documentary, which follows 7 autistic adults. And Ava has also written for PBS kids shows, including the upcoming Carl the Collector, featuring neurodiverse and autistic actors. So, Ava, we're gonna start with you. Many folks from underrepresented backgrounds find they end up being the only one in the room, especially when working in the entertainment industry. I know you've encountered this in the past. What advice do you have for others in this situation?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. This is Ava. First, thank you so much for having me, Lauren and Shelley, and the entire team at RespectAbility. I am a Chinese woman with long black hair and blonde highlights with bangs. I'm wearing a yellow sweater, and behind me is a floor to almost ceiling wall of books. I'm sitting on my couch in the living room. Yeah, so to answer your question, I'll actually start with my advice, which I know is sometimes easier said than done. And I think it's just overall to be confident. As I wrote, kind of fake it till you make it, as they say in the industry, because you do belong in these spaces. And people need to start welcoming more diverse people into Jewish spaces, disability spaces, and the entertainment industry. Obviously, I know this is easier said than done. Yeah, because being the only person in a room can sometimes feel othering or like you don't belong. I definitely think I feel this more as a person of color and an Asian person. Although my mom and I knew a handful of Chinese Jewish adoptees when we were living in New York City, and talking to Lauren a while ago, she was like, yeah, there's a couple down in the Maryland, DC area. Of course, it just depends on where you live. Where I primarily grew up in Columbus, Ohio, not so much. A lot of adoptees, but not as many like Chinese Jewish adoptees. So it definitely sometimes has people question whether I'm Jewish or not. And I know we'll go into that a bit more. About being disabled, often I obviously don't know if I'm the only autistic person in the room. I try not to make assumptions. Autism is often a non-visible disability. And in these instances, depending on where I am and the people in the situation, I sometimes take it as an opportunity to educate people and break stereotypes, just like breaking stereotypes of what a Jewish woman in America looks like. And often, sometimes I'm the only when I'm hired as an autistic consultant. So I'm obviously there for education. And it's really cool because they hired me. And most of the time, because of that, they listen to me. So they want me there. And so it's also, a great area for education. At the same time, as you mentioned, How to Dance in Ohio, which I'll talk about more later, it's also great working with other autistic people like on these projects, because then we can give different perspectives and have a neurodiverse community within the work.
Thank you. Yes, bringing in all of your various identities, which I think it can be hard to like just say, oh, I'm just this or just that. We are what makes us up. And so, Eden, I'd like to kind of come to you next. So we all identify as Jewish and disabled, but as so many other things that each of us may identify as well. How do you choose to present yourself, and does it change in different environments?
Yeah, so thanks, Lauren. First of all, super excited to be part of this and just be part of this month, honestly. My name is Eden. I wear glasses. I have an open button-down shirt. I have a library to my right and a white wall to my left, olive skinned. So it's a tough nut to figure out, Lauren, because and there's so many people here like that, exactly that, like, for instance, for an up-and-coming filmmakers or even mid-level filmmakers, you need to constantly introduce yourself in so many places. And like you mentioned, how do you introduce yourself? Like, I'm alone. I have so much stuff that shaped the way I tell stories. Either it's growing up as a Jewish Israeli during the second Intifada, going to the army. I never finished high school, so ADHD and dyslexia is part of my identity. I've been an immigrant in the States for 7 years, so how do you even go about it? And you kind of mentioned it a bit, that it's almost like a dance. You just figure out who's the partner there and what's the beat that is playing. And then you kind of struggle a bit, but you figure out how to present yourself in the best way that you can, because at the end of the day, presenting yourself, it's only the first part, and hopefully it opens door for deeper conversations and hopefully for creative conversations. So if you hit some of the marks, I feel like the rest can come later on, but it's always a struggle and you always feel like you compromise. But that's the dance, I guess.
It is. I feel like the theme of today will be the dance. Asha, how can we embrace all aspects of our identity, especially when working in such a difficult industry?
That's a wonderful question. First, I would like to introduce myself. I am Asha Chai-Chang. I'm a woman of color, because all the identities I have. And I have purple hair. I'm wearing a green top, and behind me I have my dramatic orange drapes, and the rest of my room with a mirror in the back. And my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm based in LA. So for embracing, I would say that each of our identities really shapes who we are. And naturally, we're going to always have multiple identities, right? Like we could be a friend to one person, a stranger to another, daughter, son, like you're always going to have different identities. And so I think it's great to, once you start to really discover yourself, then it's also easier for you to connect with others. I know that's really important for me as a storyteller, that I really dive deep into who I am, really think about how I relate to the world, and then it helps me to think about how would others, right? To be empathetic and think about how would others relate to something similar or to the same situation, how would they act differently? And so I feel like once we realize that all of these differences are, whether in perspective or identity, is super important, then it becomes easier to walk into a room and just be like, yeah, this is me, this is who I am, and just standing your truth. So I feel like the reason why I said the reminder about the different identities, just for us to think, you're right, like we don't, like, because everyone wants to box us in and try to, how do we categorize you? And I'm like, well, we're gonna be multifaceted regardless. So why not really just embrace that from that level, and then from there be able to present it, and it might be a way to connect with someone or find your community, right? Like we are here now. So yeah, if you want to have that sense of belonging, you have to accept yourself first.
It's so beautiful, accepting yourself. Ava, I believe you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, it's really brief, but I really love like what Asha just said, the last thing about accepting yourself, and then what Eden said about dancing to the beat of whoever you're introducing yourself to. And I just had a couple of things to go off of that. Also, my pronouns are she, hers. I can't remember if I said that, but yeah, I think what's interesting is that, like Eden said, sometimes it feels like a compromise, and I think sometimes it feels like a compromise. And I know you have a question for me about this a little bit, so I won't touch on it 100% now. But I think, as Asha said, also, like, and the dancing to be of whoever you're introducing yourself to, and being willing to tell them that you're multifaceted, that you have all these intersections that could come into your work and really help the entire room. At the same time, like, as I always as everyone tells me, and I always tell other people, do your research on the person. Right, just how people know, like, oh man, you realize you both like love dogs or like speak the same language, like another language or something, went to the same college, like a common one, right? Like, so I know who I am, but it depends on who I'm talking to. So if I was just talking to someone who might introduce me to an agent, and that agent is actually more in the DEI space of the company. But like, for example, if I was talking to an agent for who represents actors, I might like put on the back burner my writing aspirations or consulting. Or on the flip side, if I was talking to a writing person, right, or who's looking to get to staff up people or for a consulting job, it makes them easy, right? Because sometimes having a box makes people easy to make the connections. Because if you just tell them all this stuff, they're like, where am I going to put you? You're like so cool, but like, what? Make it easy so when something comes across their desk, like, oh, Ava's like an Asian writer, and I just like met with her. Boom, I'm gonna, because maybe they get more writing calls. They're not in the acting space. So I'm depending on how the conversation goes, then you can bring up some of your other areas. And I'm learning not to be as fearful of bringing up other areas of myself of what makes sense. But yeah, really just do your research on the person and learn what they're going to connect to that connects back to you, I think.
Wonderful. Everyone, I feel like you're each giving really great advice for anyone who's watching this webinar, whether live or later on a recording, because I think it's difficult no matter what age anyone is or what stage you are in the industry of how do you, present yourself and such. And Asha, I'd like to come back to you. Have you ever concealed or do you ever conceal any part of your identity during a job interview?
Well, it's great you say that because Ava just mentioned that great idea, right? That part where you're like, ooh, maybe you don't need to know this right here, or this is not the right audience for it. And to lean in like that, to lean into the places where you do connect or how you can be best of service for the job, right? So, this actually happened recently where I do production accessibility work, but I'm also a creative, right? I'm also a writer director. And I had to just lean into being like, you don't want to know much about the writing director right now, do you? Okay, cool. We're gonna have to talk more about accessibility here. And then that's where I did start to reveal more about my disabilities, right? But maybe I may not do that in another job where someone's like, we want a director for an action film. And I'm like, I want to do that so bad. And I'm like, and I remember actually that happened. Someone's like, are you gonna tell them about your respiratory disabilities and anxiety? I'm like, no, this is not, maybe not right now. Well, I want them to see the work I've created, really see what I can do first. And then if it comes up on the job, if we're not able to make, to have an accessible set, I may make some suggestions then. Yeah, so that has happened where I've definitely concealed it then. But it was just, case by case. But it's still my thing at the beginning always was like, just really know, because I know for me, that was hard. I used to conceal it and mask all the time. And right, because we have non-visible disabilities, and then you wait until you're in a really bad situation, and then people are like, why didn't you say something? So that's why I say it's like, maybe for the interview I won't, because I want them to focus on my actual talents and my work and what I can bring to the table. And then, but yeah, so conceal it, but then eventually you're gonna have to talk about it and reveal it to properly execute the job. Or maybe it doesn't actually matter, right? Maybe that's all they wanted was to consult with you. And so you're like, okay, like I can help you in the things you want to know about. And it was good to meet you. We'll connect another way. So I would say that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those are a
Yeah.
couple examples when it's happened.
Figuring out ways where you're concealing or masking almost always leads to disaster later on, because you're not then going to be able to get the accommodations that you need in order to be able to succeed and be the best writer, director, or whatever it is that you're working on at the moment. So I think it's something each of you have learned, and I know it's something that it takes time for people to learn that of when you feel comfortable being able to disclose different parts of your identity. Ava, when we were chatting yesterday, you were talking about finding specific spaces where you'd feel comfortable.
And going off of what Asha just said, I think it definitely, I can't remember the exact instance now, but it kind of was similar of waiting until they want you, right? And then when they want you, when you are hired, or maybe even more in just the finalist phase of different aspects, if you can get that information, then they're probably more willing to make changes and see what can be done. Because and this for me definitely is more about the purposefully concealing or just like not telling them that I'm autistic. And then when they want you, they are more willing to be accommodating. But sometimes when you know you're like, you know, this huge pool and they're looking for they're in on the elimination process, then maybe I'm more hesitant to give them something easy to eliminate you for, right? Because they'll never say it because it's technically against the rules, but everyone has, you know, these preconceived notions, especially of autism and disability and what that means. Obviously, I can't hide my race, and recently, like, being Jewish hasn't come into like be hired for stuff except for my JDAIM speeches. So it's like, oh, but that's cool, she's Jewish, like, you know, like whatever. And so I feel like the thing that often is sometimes concealed is the disability, because it definitely is, you know, you say the word autism and oftentimes if people know what it is, they think of a certain thing and they might underestimate you and your abilities. So for example, the first thing that came to mind when we were chatting was about auditions. I know we're mainly here talking about being writers, etc. But like, so when sending in self-tapes, the main area where I'm hesitant to say is autistic, because I know there's a lot of stigma. Unless of course they're asking for disability or a diverse actor. And then of course, you know, you say that right up front in your slate, or sometimes I put my name, Ava Rigelhaupt, because Ava Rigelhaupt doesn't tell them that I'm a non-white person, especially in America. They probably would assume until seeing a picture of you. So if you have an inkling that this department is looking for diverse people, I put that at the end of my signature. You know, it just gives them something else that's like, or if you know, again, research that you're emailing with, maybe, you know, you do a little stalking of that person, you figure out that they're an East Asian woman too, like, I'm gonna sign that off. And so at the same time, you know, when they are looking for a disabled actor, I don't hold that back, right? I talk about it or just say it in my slate or in my interview. And since I don't have an agent, I mainly do open calls that sometimes come through, like RespectAbility or other Asian American organizations that are looking for these diverse people, and that are calls where I feel like I probably could bring more of my full self to. Same for writing and stuff like that. Though recently for my writing and consulting, I have been hired because I'm autistic. So that is a little bit more of an area where I do pitch that first more, because people are looking for authentic people to tell those stories.
So thank you. And Eden, it looks like you have something you wanted to add.
No, just kind of like amen to Ava on the fact that, like, for me, it took a second to realize that what I consider for my childhood, the struggle with my disability, or the fact that, like, we're part of a minority either by being disabled or by being Jewish, and it's almost like, how do you handle it? And even more so today, that it feels like society is trying to kind of like, oh snap, we missed, like, we didn't really count you folks. And then I heard from one of the people, I think honestly in the RespectAbility Lab, that the people who have so much privilege and they don't have any, they're not part of any minority group, and they just have everything on a silver spoon, they use their privilege. So if now all of a sudden, the fact that I can say all this multi-intersectional stuff about me, or Ava or Asha, about like the stuff that makes her, and we can, like, in your face, and this is why you want to talk to us, and this is why we're a specific voice, hell yeah, we should use it, because they've been using it for like more than 100 years. It's time that we can also kind of like, what about us, folks? Just to add to that.
Yeah, it's important to be able to kind of see how each of our diversity actually is a positive thing and not a negative thing. And how, you know, it can affect us potentially even getting jobs. Like, obviously there's a lot of stigma out there around disability and other items that, you know, could prevent someone from getting hired. But in other cases, as, you know, Ava previously mentioned, like sometimes, you know, that is the reason that you get in the room. And then my goal is the reason you stay in the room has nothing to do with like your identity aspect, but because you're an awesome writer or filmmaker or whatever it might be, because each of you and so many others are extremely talented individuals. And, you know, hopefully people will be able to just look at your craft and say, oh, I'm hiring you because of your talent, and such. But in the way the industry is today, you know, we all know that that's not always the truth, unfortunately. So Eden, I'd like to stick with you. You know, how does all of this affect and influence your filmmaking? I know when we were chatting earlier this week, you mentioned that like your disability in particular, like has a big influence on your filmmaking.
No, that's a fun question because it took me a minute to figure out how the two intervene, and the funny thing is that you learn it after the fact, like after you've written some stuff, after you made some stuff, you're like, oh, I have this thread line of all this stuff that connects directly to all the stuff. So for instance, like an easy example is with my PTSD. I think I kind of got drawn to the genre filmmaking because there's so much violence there, and being exposed to violence from a young age, or even I just, you know, there's stuff that like you're like Freud yourself and you figure out like years later, but like just recently I figured out that the first movie I ever watched was Goodfellas, which shouldn't happen to a 10 years old, but I was next to my older brother who couldn't care less. And like a few weeks after, I was like alone at the house, and a couple of like repo people came when stuff weren't that easy financially in the house. And they were like, I was alone there, like, we're gonna take your TV. And like for a 10, 11-year-old, that's like pretty traumatic to see this, to have this kind of experience. And fast forward like 20 years later or so, 15 years later, and like I'm writing or I'm developing projects that the soul of these repo people are like in the characters. And it's like kind of like me being like therapeutic about it and being able to mix my love for genre and take like my wounds or whatever you want to call it and kind of like mix and match them and go back to what you said, Lauren, about craft. That's what makes my craft specific. That's what makes Asha's craft or Ava's craft specific. It's like this stuff that shaped us that then we can like throw into the bin and create this kind of stuff. So it's kind of fun. It's like, even like if I'm not selling this or that, I'm like, even now I'm developing something for the Israeli television that it's about anti-Semitism on social media. And I'm having so much fun. I'm just like writing and laughing myself because it's a dark comedy, and I'm just taking all the horrendous stuff I see on social media, and then I put it like through the filter of like this crazy plot and characters. And it's so like you treat yourself while you're like in the hustle and the bustle of like making stuff. So it's kind of like a cheat code. It's kind of fun.
And in about 10 minutes or so, we're actually going to get to see a clip from the short that you mentioned. And, you know, speaking on like dark comedy, I mean, sometimes when you're involved with different things in your childhood and growth and such, that is the way to kind of, you know, cope and get through. And I talk to so many filmmakers and writers who use this medium as a way to cope through some sort of trauma, and such. So it's I think it's common, no matter what your religion or background might be, that, you know, people find their way to work in this industry because of that. Obviously not everyone, but some. And, you know, speaking of content, you know, we've all encountered content that has a variety of tropes in there that would not be so helpful, whether we're talking about from the disability perspective or the Jewish perspective. In both, we find content that depicts disabled and or Jewish people as, you know, in quotes, not normal, not the typical person. In both communities, many of us have felt, you know, not necessarily talking about the four of us present here, but in general, you know, felt the need to hide identities as either Jewish or disabled or both. And so much more, like when you're part of multiple communities where you may want to hide something at some point. There is an internalized hate that many people do have, which does contribute to depictions of disabled and Jewish characters as, you know, not being fully human sometimes. And there's external hate from outside the communities, and a lot of misunderstanding, which leads to inaccurate portrayals. So in an age when many other marginalized groups are kind of proudly leaning into their identity, you know, why is it difficult for, you know, those of us who identify as Jewish and or disabled, sometimes difficult for us to lean into that and such? Asha, I'd love to start with you. I'd love your thoughts.
Wow. Sorry, this is I had so many thoughts
Lots
as
to
as
unpack.
you were sharing this, and I was like, man, especially about tropes and the idea of being treated almost like you're not. I said this comment one time when I was at a film when I was at an industry event. This is not what I was going to talk about. This is actually something else that came to mind. I remember I stood up and I was like, I was going over, they're like, oh, what's your background? And there was like a film that we were watching that was intersectional. I remember it was about intersectionalities. And I remember surmising, and I'm like, oh, I'm just basically everything America was taught to hate. And they're like, what did you say? I was like, I'm just basically, and I remember repeating it, and the audience was just like, oh, I was like, oh, well, I mean, I know that. And then I remember like going through, I was like, well, I'm Jewish, I'm Latina, I'm Black. And I'm like going through all these, I'm like, yeah, all of them have, right? There's these stereotypes, like I'm also, you know, disabled. So here we are. And I remember they're just like, I remember people at the end were just like, I have to talk to you about that because I'm still digesting what you just said. And to follow up with that, now I'll share the story of what what we did talk about, which is similar to being like in the industry and the idea of why can't we proudly speak about our Judaism and our faith. And I remember I wear my chai all the time. And it's hard to see right now, but I wear my chai all the time, right? It's my good luck charm. And so I met, so to me, it's normal. It's an everyday thing. And I didn't think anything of it until I was at an event and someone looked at me and was like, you dare to wear that? I said, pardon? They're like, the Jewish thing, you wear that? I was like, well, I'm a Jewish woman, so yeah. And same event, someone turned to me and was like, wow, you're actually, and then it was like someone else who also was Jewish, like, yes, like I feel like I found my people. Thank you so much for actually just being open and like, being Jewish and proud. And I was like, of course I am. And like, I'm like, my head, like, am I missing something? I'm like, did I not realize, I guess, in Hollywood that there's this much anti-Semitism? Like, really? And but the good thing that came out of it was I was able to find my people, right? I was able to find my people. But the issue I had that I was left with, the residue, is you would, from the other conversation where someone said, you dare to wear that? I'm like, I had to sit with it for a while. And I went to a mentor, because we always hear the comment of, oh, Hollywood is run by Jewish people. And I'm like, that's funny because I've been wanting a holiday film with us for years. Like I'm just like thinking, like I would love for more films like that to be at least more mainstream, right? Or even the idea of that of talking about family, being around it. And so we're getting more. I mean, we're seeing some now, thankfully, but it was still for us who apparently run the industry, it's been a minute, it's been a while. But yeah, my mentor did say the comment of like, I was, because he's also Jewish, and I was like, oh, my latkes came out good. I'm like showing him pictures. He's like, don't do that. I'm like, what? Why? Like, don't. He's like, right now, just ride. And he tried to say, oh, just ride this wave or ride that wave. And I'm like, I can't help it's going to come through in my writing. And it did, which we'll talk about that later. but yeah, for a while, I remember I was like, the first time I started to break out and share more about myself, I was met with both, basically. That's all I'm trying to say. I was met with both the how dare you and the thank you for being here and thank you for letting people know that we are here and that we are human and and just creating that sense of community there. It's just sorry. I don't know what to really say right there. It's just like it really I guess no, I know what to say. I know what to say is that I am proud, and if that means that I am being rebellious for just owning who I am, then that's okay. And you should feel the same. So if you're also Jewish and you're in the industry, like find your people. Don't worry about people telling you about whether you should or should not be here. I dealt with the same thing when it came to supporting films. I remember this idea of like, if you support Jewish films, that means or even films from Israeli films, if you support that then means you cannot support other films from other regions. I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't stop trying to pit us against each other. Allow for us to have our individuality, and me embracing my identity does not instantly mean I don't like your existence. I hope that, right? Like, I don't like that. I hope that's the takeaway. Do not be proud of who you are, but do not then therefore try to hate on others for identifying who they are. So that's that.
I think something else I'm taking away from what you're saying is this idea that you can have compassion for many groups of people at the same time, and you don't need to be this or that. And I think going back to something else that you had said was, the feeling of being told to hide part of your identity, which we kind of touched upon at the beginning of this conversation. And, the feeling ashamed to be proud of whatever part of your identity at the moment that you might not be so proud of, whether it is dealing with Judaism or your disability or any other identity that each of us hold. Really, really coming into your own and being able to embrace all parts of yourself. And Ava, you mentioned to me that, when you're trying to embrace all parts of yourself, that people often assume you're not Jewish, but when they find out you are, like, sometimes their opinions of you change or they don't believe you. Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. I'm not quite sure if their opinions of me changed. I don't know. I never asked them long enough, but I think definitely it's like they don't believe me. And yeah, so speaking about being the only, I'm oftentimes the only POC in many Jewish spaces, excluding this one that like makes an effort to bring in Jews of color. But more or less, I've gotten used to it. I just wrote down a stat that I was using for another blog. Like, it is true, Ashkenazi Jews in America are about 68% of the Jews. So who Ashkenazi often present as white. So I mean, my mom's Ashkenazi, and so most people have never met a Jew of color, and the stat is even higher for North America. So it's reasonable that they assume most Jews are white because that's dominant like representation and the actual numbers. But obviously, when I say I'm Jewish, I would like people to respect that and to know that there are like Asian Jews and Jews of color, and Jews of color in other places of the world where they are a little bit less of a minority. And so I think everyone has their own assumptions about groups of people, and they probably, they assume POCs are Jewish, and of course, people, it makes it easier for even our brains to put people in boxes, because that's how we try to figure out the world. If we like try to like understand everyone's like multi-hyphenate identity, it would be really amazing, but also probably really like information overload to our brains, and we just probably couldn't handle it. That's, I always joke, an animal needs to look at a lion, a horse needs to look at a lion and be like, yep, that's a lion, like I better run, like, so that maybe is how like we got to our quick assumptions of people. And so they probably, like back to humans, often probably assume that all POCs wrongly assume have certain views, maybe even certain views about Jews. And when we add another facet, like being Jewish, to our identity, it really throws them off and confuses them. I can't remember if I said this, but yeah, even I've been questioned whether I'm Jewish in not with RespectAbility, another what's it called? Another organization, but like in Jewish disability inclusion space. And it was just like really ironic. One person thought that I wasn't Jewish, but that they let in a like non-Jewish disabled ambassador to the program. And I was like, nope, I'm Jewish. And so, yeah. And the last tidbit is like, I can't speak for Asha or the other person, but I'm assuming people in the room when Asha was like, I'm everything people in America are taught to hate, we're not expecting her to say Jewish. You know, they probably were expecting like Black or Latino, woman, etc. But they weren't expecting her to say Jewish. Because obviously most of the time you can't know people's religion from just looking at them. But yeah, that probably really threw them off. And it confuses people. And it just like, people like to put people in boxes. And sometimes, what's it called? Yeah, not want other people to have compassion for someone else's existence, even if they embrace their own identity. It just is like the confusing world we live in.
Very much a confusing world we live in. I think that really sums up a lot what we're talking about. And I'd also like to just remind folks in the audience that if you have questions, please add them to the Q&A box on this platform. And while we're waiting for questions to come in, we're going to get a chance to see clips from each of our three individuals of work that they've been working on. And then I'd like to kind of start with you. And, you know, we talked about anti-Semitism in the US has really been on the rise, like, you know, not just now, but the past few decades. You know, everyone here is part of a community who might be hated based on part of our humanity and identity. And this really also overlaps with ableism and such. And we all know how important it is to have authentic portrayals on screen. I mean, when you get back to some of the goals of RespectAbility's entertainment and news media team is to have that authentic, real portrayal on screen, which plays a large role in how the public understands people who are different from them. So I'm curious, how has anti-Semitism and ableism influence your storytelling? And if you wouldn't mind also kind of setting up a clip that we'll then show.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great subject to talk about, because it feels like it's never gonna end, right? It's so depressing. I think our power as storytellers is the fact that we have the creativity and the ambition and the weirdness to bring specific characters that can make someone because so much of racism, not just anti-Semitism, just like pure hate, comes from ignorance. And I think the power of going and bringing in a character that does for instance, I'll give you an example, like Ava mentioned about like the percentage of like Jewish Ashkenazi in the States, of like my roots, like you mentioned at the start, is like Yemen and Libya. So in a lot of my writing, my characters really care about food and really care about hosting, and there's some, it's almost like Arab mannerism to it, because it's just the roots that I grew up with. And I think the moment that you put it on the screen, it makes those people who are ignorant, it kind of like open another like room in their brain and put a question mark there. And I think hopefully it can lead us to a place of people asking more questions, because right now everyone don't ask any questions, they just hit like. But it's this kind of stuff, like I always try to, like, you know, even like tiny moments or whatever it is, that like to bring for my own life. And the cool thing about going into genre, going into the comedies and thrillers and stuff that are more mainstream, I believe that it can allow, it can get to like more audiences, because there's so many amazing biopic films and projects that sometimes they stay, although they're amazing, they don't really go to like mainstream. So one of the things that I'm at least aspiring to do with my work is to get to mainstream, because like, oh, I want to see, like, we're going to talk about the clip in a second, I want to see this film about like this dark comedy about these two body disposals for a crime organization. And while you watch it, you're like, oh, I never seen these specific characters. Oh, I never these specific characters that are also Jewish or Arab or or that they're like, or they have disabilities. So kind of like prepping for the clip that I would love to share with everyone is, so my short film that now I'm also developing it for a bigger thing. It's the story, basically, it's about two body disposers at the age of like 60s, 70s, like they're like past their peak in the crime world, and they're basically, their job is just to dispose of bodies. That's all they do. That's why it's called the disposers, that they're the disposers. And the hook of the film, at least, is that one of them is about to head out and like take an early retirement without notifying his boss. He doesn't know that his partner for the past like 50 years got an assignment to kill him before he even leaves. And so you get this like bromance, dark comedy thriller. And the clip that I'll share now, so there's a ritual that they do, and every time they bury someone, they do their own version of a Kaddish, of like the mourner's prayer. For anyone who doesn't know what's a Kaddish, I hope some people don't know what's a Kaddish, because it's not a fun thing to know. So in the clip, I just basically took the way I grew up with my dad and how he would do like the Kiddush. Like my dad on the Kiddush, on the Shabbat dinner, he'll hold like the cup and he'll be like, Yom HaShishi, because he read it so many times. So I just like, what if I'll bring this kind of like prayer for my dad and put it like in this kind of film, in this kind of moment, and it just adds another specific color to a genre that we've seen so many times and character we've seen, but there's something fresh about it. So that's, I think, kind of like a context for watching the clip now.
גדל והתקדש שמי רבה ברדה, נאמר אמן. אמן. אמן ברך והשתבח גם הוא, לעליו לברכתה ונפתה ואמרו אמן. אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו והוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. אמן.
Now, and you're making this into a feature film as well, in 1 minute or less. Can you share a little bit more, especially like what you're able to add to these characters?
Once you go to a feature, you can really expand on the story and the character. So something fun that I doing now with the feature version is that one of them gonna sharing with me my ADHD, and he says like intense ADHD and he can't really control himself in a way. And the other one has a PTSD, and I feel like it's like a privilege to be able, going back to stuff we talked about, to like, again, show this character and bleed your own like disability into it. I think it makes it more original for the audience, and it also makes for better characters while you're really write what you know, as they say. So that's one of the things that I'm adding to the feature version.
I love how you're developing even more character, you know, and that they're becoming even more three-dimensional characters, which is something we always talk about, and such. And all right, Asha, I wanted to come over to you. I know you're also working on, so we're going from dark comedy to, you know, preschool and comedy, so completely different genres here. So I know you're currently creating a preschool animated Spanish bilingual TV series, Wendy on Wheels, which we had the chance to workshop with you during our RespectAbility's Children's Content Lab in 2022, yeah. And recently created a trilingual Spanish, English, and ASL sitcom proof of concept and film Marque Dos, which just premiered at an Academy Award qualifying film festival. So congrats. So can you please share more and then set up the clip that you want to share?
For sure. And Eden, that was awesome. I just want to say that. I enjoyed it. I was like, yes, okay. But yes, so for Marque Dos, I definitely do more family and family and children content. That's like my happy space, but I still love comedy. I always have appreciation for it. And so Marque Dos is just a story about, to be honest, the original logline was about the time when I actually wanted to stop speaking Spanish because I wanted to fit into one box, but then my mom at home, who is multilingual, was like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean you're gonna like I'm done. I'm kind of dramatic. I'm not sure if anyone knows that about me, but I'm very dramatic. And that was really how I felt. I was like, that's it. I'm never doing it again. And after having an experience working in the in the marketing world, and that's pretty much what Marque Dos is about. It's like it's about a young woman working in the marketing industry, and this is like all the trouble she deals with during the job, and being left with that idea of feeling so drained that she couldn't fit into one box or the other, that she's like, maybe I'll just have to give up a part of myself. And yeah, so this is a trailer, just kind of talks about that, and I hope you guys enjoy it because the film is fun.
Amira Galvez here. I work full-time as a brand ambassador in the experiential marketing industry.
That's what I said.
She's coming back! She's coming back! Get out of here! Go, 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 go!
Oh, yeah!
My mommy is total bean. Marcados. Marcados. ¡Nadie te lo quita!
So congrats again on it being at a Academy Award, a qualifying film festival. And I know that you're going to be hitting the short film circuit, the film festival circuit with it. And so exciting to see what you'll kind of be doing with it. Ava, would like to come over to you, who also is kind of more in the children and family space right now, but I know you're also looking to kind of do more in kind of the adult space. So looking to see where you'll end up there. So last week, I've gotten to embrace a bunch of your things most recently. So last week I was at Kids Screen and I had the opportunity to meet the creator of Carl the Collector, which you're writing for. And then I was able to come over to New York City to see the How to Dance in Ohio for its last weekend on Broadway. And so you've been having this opportunity to really work on a lot of these authentically autistic projects. What do you want people to know about these projects?
Yeah, I will talk briefly about them, and then I can go in a bit more depth after the clip. So as you said, I'm a writer for Carl the Collector, which is also a kids animated TV series for ages about 3 to 6 years old, 7, and it will be released in the fall. The characters are all animals. So Carl, the main character, is a raccoon. He's also autistic. His friend Lotta is a fox who's also an autistic young girl. And I got the job through someone else at the musical who heard that they were looking for autistic writers. And it's my first big TV writing job, besides a couple of co-writing things with 9 Story Media Productions. That's also a kids production house. And it's a great team. And I'm really excited that my first writing job helps young children understand autism in a more funny and entertaining way. So like, speaking of fun and entertaining ways to push some disability representation in entertainment, the musical How to Dance in Ohio is also really exciting. And I'm the autistic creative consultant on it. And the show follows 7 autistic young adults and their psychologist, Dr. Amigo, at a social skills center in Columbus, Ohio, as they come of age, form connections, and prepare for a spring dance. It's authentically cast, so 12 autistic actors are making their Broadway debuts, along with other autistic and neurodiverse artists offstage that made their Broadway debuts, including myself. Lauren rushed over to see it because unfortunately it just closed on Broadway February 11th. But we hope that there is a future for it sometime. And actually, I'll put in the chat, well, depending. The original Broadway cast recording is streaming on all music streamers.
Going places, I am going places. There are places I need to be. I mean that literally. But most of the spaces that I want to get to were not designed for me. In Ohio, in
So we are coming up the last few minutes. So I'm gonna start with Ava, because I know you mentioned that you wanted to share a little bit more about Ohio. I'm gonna give each of you a minute for kind of closing thoughts. And also wanted to share a question from Amanda Bulwer, who saying thank you all for joining, and wants to know how you felt supported by Jewish or disability communities. So if there's anything there that you would like to add, but Ava, I will start with you.
Yeah, I'll keep my answers shorter. And so just to make it clear, so like all the people, the young adults sitting in the red chairs were our autistic lead actors. And so as a consultant, as one person put it, I wear many hats, and my role has evolved since 2021 when I joined the team. I work across teams to ensure a culture of accessibility and inclusion in everything that we do, both internally and public facing. So it started with working with the writers on authentic autistic characters that work is really similar to my work in TV and film. I also forgot to mention that it is based on Alexandra Shiva's HBO Peabody Award-winning documentary of the same name. So we melded the characters of the real people from the real Dr. Amigo in his counseling center with our actors and a fictionalized show on stage. In addition, we worked with the actors and the crew as our teams evolved on making accessible rehearsal spaces and asking like, what do you need to do your best work? We have an access needs survey that we sent out to everyone, regardless of whether they are autistic or not. And it asked questions like that. Actually, it was just made public, so I can drop it in the chat later. And I also helped them work on a press language guide for terms that our show prefers and why, such as like identity first, autistic person versus person first, person with autism. And just like any show, we of course wanted all of our teams and co-producers to present a unified front and explain the show in the same manner, but especially because the musical highlights the autistic community, which is often marginalized, misunderstood, and ill-represented. And so also lastly, I worked on like public facing stuff that has to do with outreach to organizations like RespectAbility to spread the word, and audience accessibility, like cool down spaces. We had two cool down spaces in the Velasco, a No Before You Go guide, and a sensory friendly advisory list. But our show has been formed with access at the forefront instead of access as an afterthought. Or as we say, it's not just about being invited to the party, it's being asked to dance. So it's really extraordinary. And across the world, people have come to see it, and people really feel seen because, as you could see possibly from the clip, our show highlights the joys and successes of the autistic community. As Ashley Wool, one actress, said, it's not in spite of being autistic that our characters and even our like real actors have succeeded. It's a yes and. It's also a fun callback to acting and improv rules. So, you know, it's a joyous representation that is often a contrast to many of the representation that focuses on the struggle. Yeah, our musical shows that too. As one person said, it's real and it's authentic.
Thank you. Asha, if we can ask you to keep to 30 seconds and then edit. I'll close it down.
So there's also a question, I remember. So, okay. So I would say that after pretty much identifying community here, right, with my with my fellow Jewish friends here, whether they be filmmakers or people who are just supportive of the arts, I feel like organizations have helped me to to stay connected, and then we support each other at screenings, and then whether even for writing and like kind of sharing our scripts with one another. So there is definitely been support when it comes to the Jewish community for sure. I just want to say that I am grateful for that, and that is definitely here. And I hope to continue to champion that. Now, for some more notes from Marquelos, or the English title is like Second Chance for it. I just wanted to also say something that I was really proud of is that we were able to authentically cast, and you didn't get to see that in the clip, but authentically cast. The mom is actually disabled, neurodiverse, as well as a McCain user. We had a director of ASL, we had ASL interpreters that were also from different backgrounds on our set, and a accessibility coordinator there. So I really want to say like that's something else that's really proud that you don't get to see on, in the film, but behind the scenes, we definitely made sure that We use a fully accessible set. Our art director is also a wheelchair user. Like we honestly, like, you know what I mean? Like the whole, we were representing everybody with when it came to our set. So that's something to also know about the backstory for Marquedos. As well, it is funded by the Netflix Creative Fund for Equity, and supported by the Los Angeles Latino International Film Festival. So I did want to put that out there, just to know the background of how the Inclusion Fellowship came. And now to Eden, because I want to know about you.
No, honestly, Asha, I want to just like go back to what you said again, and I'm saying it even more so from Israel these days, that like the sense of the community, it's the like I said it to Lauren a few days ago that like it doesn't feel like a 12 hours flight. Like with everything that's happening now, I think if I can say anything, closing thoughts is like, boy, I'm so happy for like our community, and I feel like we should like stick together, and we should reach out to each other and feel comfortable to reach out to each other, because that's our superpowers. So yeah, that's kind of like, I honestly, because you know I'm kind of influenced by everything that's happening now, so that's like my biggest thing that I would like to like just add to what Asha already said, like that community, it's something so essential and amazing, and we need it. We need each other.
Thank you. That's a wonderful thing to end on. You know, needing our community and each other. In the chat, there is a link for upcoming events. We do a bunch of different events. So wanted to remind people our next virtual event for JDAIM is going to be a private sneak peek and conversation of a new short film called 13. And we also have a few other disability related events that are coming up virtually, as well as some in person. So if you click on the link that Eric just put in the chat, you can learn all the details, figure out how you can sign up. And I want to thank everyone for sticking with us for a few extra minutes as we wrapped up. And a huge thank you to Asha, Eden, and Ava. It was really an enlightening conversation, and I hope one that everyone watching could learn from, and look forward to seeing and sharing all the content you're working on now and in the future. Thank you, everyone.